Hey there! Today I will give you some useful expressions for your presentations. Whether you are a student, a company manager, a sales representative, a lecturer, or simply anyone whose job requires giving presentations, this video is for you. So let's get started. Before you give your presentation, you need to greet and welcome your audience, the people you will be addressing. You can say, "Hello everyone and welcome to my presentation." Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Hello everyone. It's nice to be here with you. It is an honor to be here today. Or to keep it short, you could simply say, "Hi everyone, thanks for coming." Now that you have greeted and welcomed your audience, you need to introduce yourself, and here is what you can say. My name is X, and I am. You say your name and your job if you are presenting to people who don't know you. For example, I am Mohammed El Musawi, I am from the HR department, or I am a PhD student. Or you can say, "Let me introduce myself. My name is X and I work for company X." Or I am a student from the English department, for example. The next step is to state the purpose of your presentation. Well, your audience might already know what the topic of your presentation is, but it wouldn't do any harm to state it. To do this, you can say, "Today I'm going to be talking about the topic, focus, subject of my presentation is. In my presentation, I would like to talk about. I'm here today to present." After stating the objective of your presentation, and before you start presenting your topic, you need to inform your audience about how you expect to handle their questions. Here is what you can say in this regard. If you have any questions, please keep them to the end. Feel free to ask any questions at the end of the presentation. I'll take questions at the end. Please hold your questions till the end. However, you might suggest taking questions while presenting. In this case, you can say, "If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them as we go along. Please feel free to interrupt me if there is anything you don't understand or anything that needs clarifying." So it all depends on how you want it to go, and also your audience need to know when it is preferable to ask questions before you start presenting. This should help things go smoothly, and also it helps to avoid surprises that could ruin the whole work. Now it's time to give an overview, an outline of your presentation. You can say, for example, "I'm going to divide this talk presentation into 4 parts. There are a number of points I'd like to make in my presentation." And you say, "First of all, I'll talk about, and then I'll go on to, then next I'll address, finally, lastly, I'll deal with or talk about." After you give an outline of your presentation, you introduce the first subject. You can use some of these phrases. So let's start with, I'd like to start by, let's begin by, first of all, I'll talk about, starting with, I'll begin by. Now when you start a new section or subject, you can say, moving on now to, turn into, let's turn now to. The next issue, topic, area I'd like to focus on. Now we'll move on to, I'd like now to discuss, let's look now at, this leads me to. Now, if you want to refer to what is coming in the presentation, you can say, "I'll talk about that in more detail later." I'll be coming back to that later. I'll elaborate on that more later. As I was saying earlier, returning to my earlier point, as I said earlier, as I previously stated, referring to, if you think an idea or a point is not well understood by your audience or it needs clarifying, you paraphrase it or clarify it. And to do this, you can say, simply put, in other words, so what I'm saying is, to put it more simply, to put it another way, for your presentation to be effective, it should contain some visual aids, like diagrams, photographs, clips, or handouts. Visual aids do liven up your presentation, and to direct your audience attention to them, you can say, as you can see from this slide, diagram, handout, if we look at the chart, the next slide shows a diagram about. This diagram shows, referring to this chart, please direct your attention to check that everybody understands what you're talking about, you can ask them some of these questions. Is everything clear so far? Is that clear? Does everyone understand? Would you like me to go over anything again? Would anyone like to give an example? One effective way of explaining your point is by giving examples. There are a few phrases you can use here. Check them out. For example, for instance, a good example of this is, as an illustration, to give you an example, to illustrate this point. Now, if you want to invite your audience to discuss or to ask questions, you can say, I'm happy to answer any queries, questions. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Please feel free to ask questions. If you would like me to elaborate on any point, please ask. Would you like to ask any questions? Or simply, any questions? And when your audience asks questions, you respond to them by saying, that's a good question. Then you give your answer. I'm glad you asked that because, or you just said, I'll be coming back to that later if you are not ready for the question. To summarize and conclude your presentation, there are multiple expressions to choose from. Such expressions are really important to say to let your audience know that you are about to wrap up your presentation. To sum up, to summarize, let's sum up the main points, shall we? Let's summarize briefly what we've looked at. If I can just sum up the main points, just to remind you of some of the issues we've covered in this talk. To conclude, in conclusion, we seem to have run out of time, so I'll conclude by saying that, to recap, now, if you are not the speaker or presenter, you are only listening or taking part in a presentation. There are some questions that you could ask the speaker in case you need him or her to explain or clarify something to you. Sorry, could you go over X again? I'd like to hear more about. Can you give an example of? Will you be going into more detail on? What did you mean by? Well, this is the end of our lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please like it and feel free to give it a share.